"Security, remove her now." The command cracked through the executive lounge like a judge's gavel, sharp enough to turn every head in the room at once. Conversations died mid-sentence. Glasses paused halfway to lips. And in the center of it all stood Vanessa Brooks, still as stone, dressed in nothing more than a fitted black t-shirt, dark jeans, and white sneakers that barely made a sound against the polished marble floor. She didn't look like money. That was the problem. The manager, a tall white woman with a tight smile and sharper eyes, stepped forward with authority that didn't belong to her, but had been worn long enough to feel real. "This area is for executive members only," she said, her voice low but cutting. "You need to leave." Vanessa didn't move. Not an inch. She simply looked at her, calm, unreadable, like she'd heard those exact words before in rooms just like this. "Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe." These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Vanessa Brooks. A man seated near the window shifted uncomfortably, glancing between Vanessa and the manager. A younger woman near the espresso bar slowly reached for her phone, thumb hovering like she wasn't sure if this was something to record or something to avoid. The air changed. It wasn't quiet anymore. It was charged. "Ma'am, I'm not asking again," the manager added, louder now, letting the room hear it. "You don't belong here." That word, belong, hung in the air longer than it should have. Vanessa exhaled slowly, her eyes flicking across the room, taking in every face, every silence, every person who chose to watch instead of speak. She'd seen this before. At 24, in a hotel lobby in Dallas, where they asked for 3 forms of ID before letting her check into a room she had already paid for. At 31, in a private club in Manhattan, where they told her the membership list was full, only to let 2 men walk in behind her without a single question. Same tone, same look, different room. The manager stepped closer, heels clicking like a countdown. "Security is on the way." And right on cue, a uniformed guard appeared at the edge of the lounge, posture stiff, eyes already locked on Vanessa like she was a problem to solve. He approached carefully, professionally, but with that same quiet assumption. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to come with me." Vanessa finally shifted. Not back, not away, just enough to face him fully. Her voice, when it came, was calm. Too calm. "Do you always remove people," she asked, "or just the ones who don't look like they belong?" The guard hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. The manager stepped in quickly, cutting off the moment. "Don't engage. Just escort her out." The word escort sounded polite. It wasn't. The guard reached slightly forward, not touching, but close enough to imply what came next. And that's when Vanessa's expression changed. Not anger, not fear. Something quieter, something heavier, like a decision had just been made. She reached into her pocket, pulled out her phone, and without raising her voice, said, "You should stop." The manager scoffed. "Or what?" Vanessa looked up, meeting her eyes for the first time with something unmistakable. "Authority. Real authority." "Or," she said evenly, "this entire place stops with me." Silence. Not the kind that fades. The kind that builds. And somewhere in that silence, something unseen had already begun. The silence did not break. It stretched. Thick. Uncomfortable. The kind that makes people look down at their drinks just to avoid choosing a side. The manager let out a short laugh, sharp and dismissive, as if Vanessa had just told a joke that did not land. "That is not how this works," she said, folding her arms tighter, reclaiming control with posture alone. "You do not get to make threats in a private executive lounge." Vanessa did not respond immediately. She did not need to. Her thumb hovered over her phone screen for half a second longer, then tapped once. No dramatic motion, no raised voice, just a single action, quiet enough that most people missed it. But not everyone. The young woman by the espresso bar noticed. Her eyes narrowed slightly, her phone now fully in her hand, no longer hesitant. Across the room, a man in a navy suit straightened in his seat, something about the shift in the air pulling his attention back. The guard remained where he was, unsure now, his hand lowering just enough to signal hesitation. Vanessa slipped her phone back into her pocket like nothing had happened. "You should have checked first," she said calmly. The manager's expression hardened. "Checked what?" she snapped. Vanessa tilted her head slightly, her gaze steady. Who you are asking to leave. The words did not echo. They landed. Heavy. Direct. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the manager smiled again, but this time it was thinner, forced. I know exactly who I am speaking to, she replied. Someone who walked into a restricted space without proper credentials. Vanessa glanced briefly at the front desk across the lounge, then back at her. And you were sure about that? It was not a question. It sounded more like a warning that had already been ignored. A soft chime cut through the room. Almost subtle, easy to dismiss. But then another followed. And another. Heads turned toward the reception counter where a tablet screen flickered once, then twice, before going dark. The receptionist frowned, tapping the screen quickly, then a little harder. That is strange, she muttered under her breath. The manager did not look back. Not yet. You are done here, she said firmly, gesturing toward the exit. Escort her out. The guard hesitated again, longer this time. His eyes flicked toward the desk, then back to Vanessa, then to the manager, caught between instruction and instinct. Vanessa watched him for a brief second, then gave the smallest nod, not of submission, but of understanding. Go ahead, she said quietly. Do your job. But something in her tone made it clear. This was not his mistake. The receptionist spoke again, louder now. The system is not responding. That got the manager's attention. She turned sharply. What do you mean it is not responding? I cannot access the member database, the receptionist replied, her voice tightening. It just logged me out. Another chime, this time from behind the bar. A bartender looked down at his terminal. Mine too. The room shifted. Not loudly, not suddenly, but enough. Conversation stopped again, not out of curiosity this time, but confusion. The manager stepped toward the desk, her heels striking the floor faster now. Restart it, she ordered. It is probably just a glitch. Vanessa remained where she was, hands relaxed at her sides, watching the movement ripple outward like she had seen it happen before. Because she had. The receptionist shook her head. It is not restarting. It says access revoked. That word landed differently. Revoked. The manager froze for a fraction of a second, then turned back slowly, her eyes finding Vanessa again. This time, there was something new behind them. Not anger. Not authority. Something closer to doubt. Vanessa met her gaze without blinking. Now, she said softly, we can start over. The word lingered in the air like a crack in glass that had not fully shattered yet. Revoked. No one said anything for a second too long. Then the room began to move again, but slower now, cautious, like everyone suddenly realized they might be standing in the middle of something much bigger than a simple misunderstanding. The manager took a step back toward the front desk, her eyes locked on the blank screens as if staring hard enough would force them back to life. Log back in, she said, her voice tighter than before. Use your credentials. The receptionist tried again, fingers moving faster, then stopping, then pressing harder as if pressure could change the outcome. It is not accepting anything, she said. It says my access level has been suspended. Another pause. This one heavier. Behind the bar, the bartender lifted his tablet again, shaking his head slowly. Same here. I cannot even pull up the menu system. A quiet ripple spread through the lounge. People were no longer pretending not to notice. Phones were out now. Not hidden. Not subtle. Watching. Recording. Waiting. The manager turned back to Vanessa, her confidence no longer steady, now cracking at the edges. What did you do? She asked, but it was not a demand this time. It was a question that already feared the answer. Vanessa did not step forward. She did not need to close the distance. The room had already done that for her. I told you, she said, her voice even, measured. This place stops with me. The guard shifted his weight, glancing toward the exit, then back at Vanessa, then at the manager. He was no longer certain who he was supposed to be following. The manager straightened again, forcing control back into her posture. This is some kind of system error, she said quickly, almost too quickly. It has nothing to do with you. But even she did not fully believe it. Not anymore. A soft tone sounded from her own device this time. She froze. Slowly, she pulled her tablet from under her arm and looked down at it. Her face changed before she could hide it. The screen displayed a single message. Access restricted. Administrative review in progress. She tapped it again. Nothing changed. The same message stared back at her, unblinking. Around her, the lounge was no longer just watching. It was understanding. A man near the window leaned forward, lowering his voice but not enough to avoid being heard. "This is not a glitch," he said quietly. The young woman by the espresso bar took a step closer, her phone now steady, capturing everything. "Who is she?" someone whispered. The question moved through the room like a current. Vanessa let it pass. She had heard that question before too. Always after. Never before. The manager looked up again, her voice lower now, controlled but strained. "If this is some kind of stunt," she said, "you are going to regret it." Vanessa met her gaze without hesitation. "No," she replied softly. "You are." Another chime. This time from the entry scanner at the front of the lounge. The green access light flickered, then turned red. A couple attempting to enter stopped short as the door refused to open. "It is locked," the man said, pulling gently, confused. Inside, every employee device remained frozen. Every system unresponsive. The lounge, once controlled by quiet authority, was now standing still, waiting for the one person who had not moved since this began. Vanessa Brooks. And for the first time since she walked in, the room was no longer deciding if she belonged. It was waiting to find out who she really was. The question did not need to be asked out loud anymore. It lived in every glance, every shift of posture, every second that stretched just a little too long. Who is she? The manager felt it before she heard it. The way the room had turned without anyone giving a signal, like gravity itself had quietly changed direction. She took one slow step toward Vanessa, no longer trying to push her out, no longer pretending this was routine. "If you think locking a system proves anything," she said, her voice controlled but thinner now, "you are mistaken." Vanessa did not answer right away. Her eyes moved past the manager, scanning the room once more, taking in the witnesses now fully awake, no longer silent observers, but participants in something unfolding. The young woman by the espresso bar stepped closer, her voice cutting through the tension with unexpected clarity. "It is not just one system," she said, holding up her phone. "I just tried to check in online for my flight lounge access. It says the entire network is down." A murmur followed, louder this time. People began checking their own devices. Screens lit up. Brows furrowed. One man shook his head slowly. "Same message," he said. "Service temporarily suspended." The manager turned sharply toward the front desk again, then back to Vanessa, her composure slipping in small, visible cracks. "This is not possible," she said, almost to herself. "This is a national network." Vanessa took a single step forward. Not aggressive, not rushed, just enough to close the space that had once been controlled by someone else. "Exactly," she said. The word landed differently now. It did not challenge. It confirmed. The guard stepped back without being told, creating space without realizing he was doing it. The power in the room had shifted so completely that even instinct was adjusting. The manager swallowed, her voice lowering. "You are interfering with operations," she said, but the words lacked force, like a rule being read after it had already been broken. Vanessa's gaze did not waver. "No," she replied. "I am revealing them." Another chime, this time sharper, more urgent. The manager's tablet vibrated in her hand. She looked down again, slower. Now, like she already knew she would not like what she saw. A new notification had appeared. Corporate oversight alert. Immediate compliance review initiated. Her fingers hesitated before tapping it. When she did, the screen shifted to a live feed of internal audit logs, lines of data scrolling faster than she could read, each one time-stamped, each one tied to access points inside this very lounge. Her name appeared, then the receptionists, then the bartenders. Every action, every command, logged, watched. The manager's breath caught, just slightly, enough for those closest to see it. Vanessa watched her carefully, not with satisfaction, but with something more controlled. Purpose. Every word, Vanessa said quietly. Every decision, every assumption. It is all recorded. The room fell into a different kind of silence now. Not confusion, not tension, recognition. The young woman lowered her phone just a fraction, eyes fixed on Vanessa. "You planned this," she said, not accusing, just stating what had become obvious. Vanessa shook her head once. "No," she said. "I prepared for it." The difference mattered. The manager looked up again, her voice no longer steady. "Who are you?" she asked, finally letting the question exist in the open. Vanessa held her gaze for a long moment. Then, just as the room leaned in, waiting for the answer that would change everything. Vanessa spoke, her voice calm, precise, and impossible to ignore. "The question is not who I am," she said. "It is why you never thought to ask before telling me to leave." And in that moment, the weight of the room shifted completely, because the answer was already there, sitting in every silence that came before. The silence that followed did not feel empty anymore. It felt exposed, like something had been pulled back that could not be unseen. The manager's grip tightened slightly around her tablet, her eyes still scanning the audit feed as if searching for a version of events that would make this smaller, more manageable. But every line told the same story. Every timestamp pointed here, to this room, to this moment. "This does not prove anything," she said finally, but her voice no longer carried authority. It carried defense. Vanessa did not interrupt. She let the words sit, just long enough for the room to measure them against everything they had already witnessed. Around them, the lounge had fully shifted. No one was pretending anymore. The man by the window stood up slowly, his drink forgotten on the table. The young woman stepped even closer now, no hesitation left, her voice low but clear. "She told you to check," she said, looking directly at the manager. "You did not." That landed harder than anything else. Because it was simple. Because it was true. The manager looked at her, then back at Vanessa, and for the first time since this began, she did not speak immediately. The guard, still standing nearby, straightened slightly, but not in defense of the manager anymore. He looked at Vanessa with a different kind of attention now. Not suspicion. Recognition trying to form. Vanessa shifted her weight just slightly, her presence filling the space without effort. "You assumed," she said quietly. "And then you acted on it." No accusation. No raised voice. Just a statement placed exactly where it could not be avoided. The manager shook her head once, as if trying to reset the room back to where she had control. "We follow protocol," she replied, but even she heard how thin it sounded now. Vanessa's eyes did not leave hers. "Then show it," she said. "Show the protocol that says remove someone before you verify who they are." The words did not echo, but they moved. Across faces. Across thoughts. The receptionist looked down. The bartender stepped back from his station. Even the couple near the entrance stopped trying to open the locked door, now watching instead of waiting. Another notification chimed. Not just one this time. Several. In quick succession. The manager's tablet lit up again, followed by the receptionist's dark screen flickering back on, only to display a new message. External oversight connected. Live review active. The room shifted again. Not with confusion this time. With weight. The kind that comes when something becomes official. Real. The manager stared at the screen, her lips parting slightly before she could stop herself. "They are watching this live?" she said under her breath. Vanessa nodded once. "Yes," she replied. "They are." The young woman near the espresso bar lowered her phone just enough to whisper. This is not just about her anymore. No one disagreed. Vanessa took another small step forward, closing the last distance that had once separated her from being dismissed. Now, there was no distance left. Only truth. "You had a choice," Vanessa said, her voice still calm, still controlled. Every person in this room did. Her gaze moved briefly across the crowd, not accusing, just acknowledging. Then it returned to the manager. "You chose to act before you understood." The manager swallowed, her posture no longer rigid, now uncertain, like the structure she stood on had quietly collapsed beneath her. "If we made a mistake," she began, the words unfamiliar in her mouth, "we can correct it." Vanessa held her gaze for a long second. Then she answered, not with anger, but with something far more final. "It was never just a mistake," she said. And this time, the room did not need an explanation to understand exactly what she meant. The words did not fade. They settled into the room like something permanent, something that could not be corrected with a quick apology or a shift in tone. The manager stood there, her posture no longer sharp, her authority no longer unquestioned, holding a tablet that now felt less like control and more like evidence. Around her, the lounge had fully transformed. No one was sitting comfortably anymore. No one was pretending this was routine. They were watching something unfold that could not be undone. Vanessa did not rush the moment. She let it breathe, let it stretch, let every person in the room sit with what had just been said. Because this was the part most people try to skip. The part where truth had to be faced without interruption. The guard cleared his throat quietly, not to interrupt, but because silence had become too heavy to hold. "Ma'am," he said, addressing Vanessa this time, his tone careful, respectful in a way it had not been before. "If there has been a misunderstanding," he did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. Vanessa looked at him briefly, then back at the manager. "There was no misunderstanding," she said. "There was a decision." The distinction landed immediately. The young woman near the espresso bar nodded slightly, almost to herself, as if confirming something she had already felt. The manager exhaled slowly, her fingers loosening around the tablet just enough to show fatigue where control had been. "Then clarify it," she said, her voice quieter now. "If this is what you are suggesting, then say it clearly." Vanessa held her gaze, steady, unwavering. This was the moment the room had been building toward. Not loud, not explosive, just inevitable. But instead of answering directly, Vanessa glanced toward the far wall where a large digital display screen had just flickered to life. It had been blank moments ago. Now it was loading. Slowly, deliberately. A corporate interface appeared, clean and unmistakable, followed by a company seal that several people in the room immediately recognized. A murmur moved through the crowd again, softer this time, more focused. The man by the window leaned forward, squinting slightly. "That is executive access," he said under his breath. The manager turned sharply toward the screen, then back to Vanessa, the realization beginning to form before she could stop it. "What is this?" she asked, but her voice carried something new now. Not challenge, not denial. Recognition trying to catch up. Vanessa did not look at the screen. She did not need confirmation. She already knew what was happening. "This," she said calmly, "is what happens when you skip the first step." The screen shifted again. Names appeared. Departments. Access logs. Then a highlighted line. Lounge operations. Regional division. Status. Under immediate review. The receptionist took a step back, her hand covering her mouth as she stared. The bartender lowered his eyes. The couple by the door stopped whispering. The room had gone beyond curiosity now. This was accountability. Live. The manager's voice dropped almost to a whisper. "This cannot be happening over one incident." Vanessa finally turned her head slightly, just enough to meet her eyes again. "It never is," she replied. The words carried weight far beyond the moment, the kind that reached backward as much as it pointed forward. The manager swallowed again, slower this time, as if each realization required effort. "Who authorized this?" she asked. Vanessa held her gaze for a long second. Then, without raising her voice, without shifting her stance, she answered in a way that removed every remaining doubt in the room. "You did," she said. And just like that, the final piece of control the manager thought she had was no longer hers to hold. The words did not echo, but they did not need to. They landed exactly where they were meant to, stripping away the last illusion of control the manager had been holding on to. "You did." It was not loud. It was not dramatic. But it was final. The manager stood still, her mind trying to catch up to a reality that had already moved past her. Her eyes flicked back to the screen, scanning the lines again as if reading them differently would change what they meant. But the system did not change. It only recorded. Around her, the room had shifted into something else entirely. Not just witnesses anymore. Observers of consequence. The guard stepped back another half step, not instructed, not commanded, just moved by instinct that no longer aligned with the authority he had been following minutes ago. The receptionist lowered her hands slowly, her shoulders dropping as if something heavy had just settled on them. The bartender did not look up at all. Vanessa remained where she was, unmoved, unchanged, like the center of a storm that had already decided its path. "You escalated this," Vanessa said quietly, her voice carrying across the room without effort. "Every step, every choice." The manager opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. Because there was nothing left to deny. The evidence was not coming from Vanessa. It was coming from her own system. Her own actions. Time-stamped. Logged. Verified. The young woman near the espresso bar spoke again, softer this time, but more certain. "She gave you a chance," she said. No one argued. Because everyone had seen it. The pause. The warning. The moment where this could have gone differently. The manager exhaled. Slowly, her shoulders no longer squared, her stance no longer defensive. "If this is a review," she said, forcing the words out carefully, "then it will be handled internally." Vanessa tilted her head slightly, her expression unchanged. It already is, she replied. Another shift on the screen. The interface updated again, the scrolling log slowing before reorganizing into a new format. Names were highlighted. Flags appeared next to specific actions. One of them blinked red. Unauthorized removal attempt initiated. The manager's name appeared beside it. The room reacted this time. Not loudly, but enough. A quiet intake of breath. A subtle step back. The kind of reaction people have when something crosses from uncomfortable into undeniable. The manager stared at the screen, her voice dropping almost to nothing. "This is excessive," she said, but even she heard the weakness in it. Vanessa's gaze did not soften. "No," she said. "This is accurate." The difference mattered more than anything that had come before. Accuracy did not negotiate. It did not adjust. It did not care about position or title. It only reflected what was done. The guard looked between them, then finally spoke again, his tone no longer aligned with the manager. "Ma'am," he said to her this time, "maybe we should wait for further instruction." It was subtle, but it was everything. The shift was complete. The authority in the room no longer pointed where it had at the start. The manager noticed. Of course she did. Her grip on the tablet tightened again, but this time it was not control she was holding on to. It was the last piece of familiarity in a situation she no longer understood. "This is not over," she said, her voice trying to recover strength. Vanessa met her eyes, calm as ever. "You are right," she said. "It is not." And for the first time since this began, that did not sound like a warning. It sounded like a process that had already begun without her. The process did not pause. It did not wait for permission. It continued, steady and precise, like something that had been set in motion long before anyone in the room realized it. The screen shifted again, reorganizing the data into something even clearer, even harder to ignore. A new section appeared. Behavioral flags. The title alone changed the air. Under it, entries began to populate one by one, each tied to timestamps, each tied to actions that now carried more weight than they had just minutes ago. The manager stared at it, her face tightening as recognition replaced resistance. "This is not standard review," she said quietly, almost to herself. Vanessa did not move. "No," she replied. "It is not." The distinction settled in deeper this time. Because standard reviews happen later, behind closed doors. This was happening now, in front of everyone. The young woman near the espresso bar stepped even closer, her voice low but steady. "They are building a case," she said. No one corrected her, because that was exactly what it looked like. The receptionist shifted uneasily, glancing at the manager, then at Vanessa, then back to the screen as if unsure where it was safe to look. The guard stood still, no longer positioned between anyone, no longer acting as a barrier, just present, watching the same truth unfold. Vanessa's gaze moved briefly across the room, acknowledging each shift, each realization, then returned to the manager. "You asked for clarity," she said. "This is it." The manager swallowed, her posture no longer trying to reclaim control, now simply holding itself upright. "This will be reviewed by corporate," she said, but the words sounded like a script she had used before, one that no longer applied here. Vanessa's expression did not change. "It already is corporate," she replied. Another notification appeared on the screen, larger this time, centered, impossible to ignore. Executive channel connected. Live oversight confirmed. The room reacted again, more visibly now. A man near the entrance took a step back. Someone whispered, "That is the highest level." The manager's hand trembled just slightly as she lowered the tablet, her eyes lifting slowly to meet Vanessa's again. There was no denial left there now, only the weight of understanding catching up. "You escalated beyond this location," she said. Vanessa tilted her head just enough to acknowledge the statement. "No," she said. "I responded at the level this required." The words did not raise. They did not need to. They carried authority that did not come from position alone, but from certainty. The bartender finally spoke, his voice careful, almost hesitant. "If executive oversight is involved," he said, "then this is no longer just about policy." Vanessa looked at him briefly, then nodded once. "It never was," she said. That landed differently, because now, everyone understood what had been underneath the surface from the beginning. Not just a denied entry, not just a mistaken assumption, a pattern. A decision repeated enough times to feel normal. Until it was not. The screen shifted again, highlighting a timeline that stretched backward beyond today. Previous complaints. Similar incidents. Dismissed. Closed. Unverified. The manager's name appeared again. And again. And again. Each entry small on its own. Together, undeniable. The young woman lowered her phone completely now, no longer recording, just watching with a kind of clarity that had replaced curiosity. This did not start today, she said softly. Vanessa's voice followed, just as steady. No, she said. Today is just when it stopped. And in that moment, the room understood something else entirely. This was not escalation. This was accountability arriving exactly where it had always been needed. The word stop did not echo, but it settled into the room with a weight that made movement feel unnecessary. No one rushed to speak. No one tried to interrupt. Because for the first time, the truth did not need to be argued. It was visible, documented, unfolding in real time. The manager stood motionless, her eyes fixed on the screen as the timeline continued to expand beyond what she had expected. More entries surfaced, more names, more moments that had once been small enough to dismiss but now sat together, forming something impossible to ignore. Her voice came out lower this time, stripped of defense. Those were handled, she said, almost instinctively. Vanessa did not respond immediately. She let the statement exist, let it settle against the evidence that contradicted it without needing to say a word. Around them, the room felt different again. Not tense, not uncertain, clear. The kind of clarity that leaves no space for denial. The man by the window crossed his arms slowly, his gaze fixed on the screen. Handled is not the same as resolved, he said quietly. The manager did not look at him. She could not, because the difference was now visible to everyone. Vanessa took a slow breath, her posture unchanged, her presence steady in a way that did not demand attention, but held it completely. You closed them, she said. You did not correct them. The distinction landed with precision. The receptionist shifted again, her voice barely above a whisper. There are too many, she said, staring at the entries. The bartender nodded once, not looking up. That means it was never random. Vanessa's eyes moved across the room again, briefly acknowledging each realization as it formed, then returned to the manager. Patterns do not appear overnight, she said. They repeat until someone decides they stop. The manager exhaled slowly, her shoulders lowering in a way that no longer tried to hold authority in place. And you decided that, she said, not as a challenge, but as an understanding she could not avoid. Vanessa met her gaze, calm as ever. No, she replied. You did. The moment you acted without checking. Another notification appeared, larger than the others, centered on the screen with a tone that cut clean through the quiet. Executive determination pending. The words held the room still. Not because they were loud, because they were final in a way nothing else had been. The guard shifted his stance again, now fully stepping away from the manager's side, no longer positioned near her at all. The change was subtle, but it was complete. The young woman near the espresso bar spoke again, softer now, but certain. This is where it turns, she said. No one asked what she meant. Everyone understood. The manager looked at Vanessa one more time, her voice quieter than it had been at any point before. If this goes through, she said, it affects more than just me. Vanessa did not hesitate. It already has, she replied. The truth in that answer did not rise. It did not need emphasis. It simply stood where it could not be moved. The screen flickered once more, the data slowing, the system preparing for the next step, whatever that would be. And in that stillness, with every eye fixed forward, with every assumption already dismantled, one thing became clear to everyone in the room. This was no longer about whether Vanessa belonged there. It was about what happens when someone who always did decides to prove it. The screen did not rush to decide. It held the room in suspension, as if even the system understood the weight of what came next. Executive determination pending remained fixed at the center, unmoving, unblinking, forcing everyone to sit in the consequence of what had already been revealed. No one spoke, not because they could not, because anything said now would feel smaller than what was about to happen. The manager stood with her shoulders lowered, no longer trying to reclaim authority, no longer pretending this could be redirected. Her eyes stayed on the screen, but her focus had shifted inward, replaying every moment that led here. Every word, every assumption, every decision that once felt routine. Vanessa did not interrupt that silence. She allowed it to exist, to expand, to settle into every corner of the room. Because this was the part most people never reached. The part where there was nothing left to argue, only to face. A soft tone broke through again. Different this time. Final. The screen flickered once, then changed. Executive determination confirmed. The words appeared slowly, deliberately, leaving no room for interpretation. Beneath it, a structured list began to populate. Immediate operational suspension. Lounge access revoked. Management under review. The manager's name appeared again, this time not as a log, not as a record, but as a subject of action. The room reacted, not loudly, but deeply. A quiet shift moved through the space, the kind that comes when something irreversible has just occurred. The receptionist stepped back fully now, her hands no longer hovering over a screen that no longer belonged to her. The bartender looked up for the first time, his expression no longer uncertain, just still. The guard lowered his stance completely, no longer positioned as enforcement, now simply a witness like everyone else. Vanessa watched the screen for a brief moment, then returned her gaze to the manager. "This is what accountability looks like," she said quietly. The manager did not respond immediately. Her eyes remained on the list, reading each line as if understanding it required more than sight. "You shut down the entire lounge," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Vanessa shook her head once. "No," she replied. "The system did, based on what it saw." The difference landed again, because it removed emotion, removed opinion, left only action and consequence. The young woman near the espresso bar spoke softly, almost to herself. She did not raise her voice once. No one corrected her, because that was the part that lingered the most. Not the shutdown, not the authority, the restraint. The manager finally looked up, her eyes meeting Vanessa's without resistance for the first time. "You could have stopped this," she said. Vanessa held her gaze, steady, unshaken. "So could you," she answered. The words did not carry anger. They carried truth. And in that moment, it became clear to everyone in the room that the outcome had not been created in the last few minutes. It had been built long before Vanessa walked in. The screen dimmed slightly, the process complete, the system no longer waiting. The lounge, once defined by who it allowed in, now stood defined by what it had revealed. And at the center of it all, Vanessa Brooks remained exactly as she had been from the beginning. Calm, certain, and no longer questioned. The system had already moved on, but the room had not. It lingered in that moment, suspended between what had just happened and what it meant. The glow from the screen dimmed slightly, no longer demanding attention, because it no longer needed to prove anything. The decision had been made, and now, all that remained was the reality of it. The manager stood still, her hands empty now, the tablet no longer a shield, no longer a tool, just a piece of equipment that no longer responded to her touch. She looked around the lounge slowly, taking in the faces that had once followed her direction without question. Now they did not look to her at all. They looked past her, toward Vanessa. The shift was complete. Not loud, not dramatic, but absolute. The receptionist stepped away from the desk entirely, as if the space itself no longer belonged to her. The bartender placed his hands flat on the counter, no longer pretending to continue work that had already stopped. The guard adjusted his stance once more, this time standing neutral, no longer positioned for instruction, no longer waiting for orders. Vanessa remained where she was, her posture unchanged, her expression steady. She did not claim the room. She did not need to. It had already aligned itself. A man near the window spoke quietly, not to anyone in particular, but loud enough to be heard. "All of this," he said, glancing at the screen, then back at Vanessa. And she never raised her voice. The words settled over the room, drawing attention to something that had been present from the beginning, but only now fully understood. Power did not announce itself. It revealed itself. The young woman near the espresso bar nodded slowly. "She did not have to," she said. The manager finally moved, just one step forward, as if trying to close a distance that no longer existed. Her voice, when it came, was stripped of everything it once carried. "What happens now?" she asked. It was not defiance. It was not negotiation. It was a question from someone who understood they were no longer in control of the answer. Vanessa looked at her, calm as ever, the same composure she had carried from the first moment she walked into the lounge. "Now," she said, "it continues." The manager's brow tightened slightly. "Continues where?" she asked. Vanessa glanced briefly toward the screen, then back at her. "Where it should have started," she replied. The words carried weight beyond the room, beyond the moment, pointing to something larger than a single location, a single decision. The system had not just responded. It had opened a process, one that extended beyond this space, beyond this team, into every place where the same pattern might exist. The realization moved through the room quietly, but unmistakably. This was not an ending. It was a beginning. The manager exhaled slowly, her shoulders lowering completely now, the last trace of resistance gone. "I did not see it that way," she said, almost to herself. Vanessa's gaze remained steady. "That was the problem," she replied. No anger, no judgment, just clarity. And in that clarity, the room understood something deeper than the outcome they had just witnessed. This was not about one person being removed or one system being shut down. It was about what happens when someone decides that silence is no longer an option. Vanessa took a slow step forward, not to claim space, but to move through it, her presence no longer questioned, no longer challenged. The lounge did not stop her. It did not resist. It simply made room. And as she passed, every eye followed, not because they had to, but because now they understood exactly who had been standing there all along. The room did not return to normal. It could not. Something had shifted too deeply for that. The lounge still stood in the same place, the same marble floors, the same quiet lighting, the same polished surfaces reflecting everything back without distortion. But the people inside it were no longer the same. Vanessa moved forward with measured steps, not hurried, not hesitant, just steady, like someone who had walked this path before and knew exactly where it led. No one stopped her. No one questioned her. The space that had once rejected her now adjusted around her without resistance. Behind her, the manager remained still, watching as the distance between them grew, not in steps, but in understanding. The system screen dimmed further, transitioning into a locked state, its final message still visible but no longer active. Review complete. Oversight continuing. It was not an ending. It was a handoff. Somewhere beyond this room, beyond this building, the process had already moved forward into places no one here could see. The receptionist glanced at the manager, unsure if she should say anything, unsure if there was anything left to say. The bartender quietly stepped away from the counter, no longer pretending to serve a room that had already been. Paused. The guard stood near the entrance, but his posture was no longer one of control. It was awareness. He watched Vanessa as she approached the exit, his expression no longer questioning, but understanding. The young woman near the espresso bar followed her with her eyes, lowering her phone completely now, as if recording was no longer necessary when the truth had already been witnessed. "She did not fight," she said softly. The man near the window nodded. "She did not need to." The words lingered, not as commentary, but as realization. Vanessa reached the exit, the door that had once denied entry now unlocking without hesitation. The red light turned green. A quiet click. The barrier was gone. She paused for just a moment, her hand resting lightly on the handle, not to hesitate, but to acknowledge the shift that had taken place. Then she turned slightly, just enough for her voice to carry back into the room one last time. "You did not remove me," she said, calm and clear. "You revealed yourselves." No one interrupted. No one responded, because there was nothing left to challenge, only to absorb. The manager lowered her gaze, the weight of those words settling in a way that could not be deflected or reassigned. Vanessa pushed the door open and stepped out, her figure moving into the corridor beyond, leaving the lounge behind not as a place she had been removed from, but as a place that had been changed because she stood in it. The door closed quietly behind her. Inside, no one moved for a moment, not because they were unsure what to do next, but because they understood that what came next would not happen here. It would happen beyond them. In systems, in decisions, in consequences that extended far past this room. The manager remained where she was, no longer at the center, no longer directing anything, just part of a process that had already begun without her. And in the silence that followed, one truth remained, clear and unshaken. Power had never been about who was allowed in. It had always been about who could not be ignored once they arrived. The corridor outside was quieter, but it carried a different kind of weight. Not the tension of confrontation, but the aftermath of clarity. Vanessa's footsteps were steady against the polished floor, each step measured, each movement unhurried, like someone who understood that nothing behind her needed to be revisited. The lounge doors remained closed now, but what had happened inside them did not stay contained. It never did. Inside, the room slowly began to breathe again, but not in the same way. Conversations did not resume. They shifted. Lower. Thoughtful. The kind of tone people use when they realize they were present for something that will not be repeated the same way twice. The manager finally moved, but not with purpose, not with direction. Just a step, then another, as if movement itself required relearning. She looked at the darkened screen one more time, as if expecting it to change, to reverse, to offer something familiar again. It did not. It remained still, its final message unchanged, its process already passed beyond her reach. The receptionist leaned lightly against the desk, her voice quiet, uncertain. "What happens to us?" she asked, not looking at anyone directly. No one answered, because the answer no longer lived in the room. It had moved elsewhere. The guard glanced toward the door Vanessa had exited through, then back at the others, his voice calm, but grounded in something new. "It depends on what they find," he said. It was not speculation. It was understanding. The bartender nodded once, slowly, as if accepting something that had been building long before today. "Then it was never just about her," he said. No one disagreed, because now it was clear. It had never been about one person walking into a space. It had been about how that space responded when it thought no one was watching. Outside, Vanessa reached the end of the corridor where sunlight filtered through tall glass panels, casting long reflections across the floor. She did not stop immediately. She let the light reach her first, let the stillness settle around her in a way that felt earned, not given. For a brief moment, she closed her eyes, not in relief, not in exhaustion, but in recognition. This was not new. It had never been new. The only difference was that this time, it did not pass quietly. A soft vibration came from her phone. She glanced down at it, reading the message without surprise. Oversight expanded. Additional locations under review. She exhaled slowly, not reacting, just acknowledging. Because this was the part most people never saw. The continuation. The ripple beyond the moment. Vanessa lifted her gaze again, looking forward, not back. The building behind her remained tall, unchanged in structure, but no longer the same in meaning. Inside it, systems were shifting, decisions were being reviewed, and conversations were happening that would not have existed without what had just occurred. She did not need to witness it. She had already set it in motion. As she stepped forward again, moving beyond the glass, beyond the building, her voice, quiet and steady, carried only to herself, but it held the weight of everything that had just happened. "I did not need to raise my voice," she said. "I became the proof." And with that, she kept walking, leaving behind not a place she had been denied, but a place that would never operate the same way again.